The market was alive with noise, yet it felt dead at the same time. The air was heavy, filled with dust, smoke, and the smell of sweat. Voices rose and fell, shouts of sellers, cries of the desperate, laughter of the cruel. It was not a market for food or clothes, it was a market for lives. Among the crowd stood a woman with pale skin and tired eyes. She was not human. Her thin frame, long dark hair, and faint glowing lines on her arms showed she was from a different world. In her arms, she held a small child, no more than 4 years old. The child's ribs pressed against his skin, and his lips trembled from hunger. The woman's name was Lyra. She had walked for days with her boy, hoping for help, but all she found were doors closed in her face. In this city, only money spoke, and she had none. The last piece of bread she gave to her son 2 nights ago. Now, his eyes looked empty, and his body shook. She knew one truth. If she did not act today, her child would not live to see tomorrow. Her hands shook as she stepped closer to the raised platform where others stood, men and women waiting to be sold. Some were proud, some broken, most silent. Guards pushed them forward while buyers with cold eyes looked them over like cattle. Lyra's heart pounded. She had promised herself she would never stand there. She had promised she would never give away her freedom. But her child's weak cough cut through her promise like a knife. What was freedom if her son died in her arms? She kissed the boy's forehead, her tears falling on his thin face. "Forgive me," she whispered. He was too weak to answer. She stepped forward. The crowd noticed her. Murmurs spread. She was different, her beauty strange, her glow rare. Traders smiled. Buyers leaned forward. The auction master raised his hand. "A new one!" he shouted. "Strong bloodline, rare kind. Who will take her?" Lyra's stomach turned. She kept her eyes low, holding her child close. She did not want to see the hungry looks around her. But then the whispers grew stronger, sharper. "A human is coming," someone said. "One of them." The crowd shifted, unease spreading like fire. Even the auction master paused for a breath. Humans were rare in this city. Most stayed in their own colonies, far from alien markets. But when one came, people noticed. Boots struck the ground. The sound was steady, heavy. Step after step, it silenced the noise around. The crowd parted, afraid to block his path. He appeared, a tall figure in a dark coat, broad shoulders moving with slow confidence. His face was shadowed under the hood of his cloak, but his eyes, cold and sharp, shone like steel. A scar ran down his cheek, and his jaw was set like stone. He looked like a man who had seen too many battles and carried too many ghosts. Lyra froze. She had heard stories of humans, dangerous, ruthless, conquerors of worlds. Some called them saviors, others called them monsters. Which one was this man? The auction master forced a smile. "Honored buyer," he said, bowing. "We have fine choices today. Strong workers, skilled fighters, and even..." His hand gestured toward Lyra, a rare beauty, with her child included. The man's boots stopped just before the platform. He lifted his head slightly, eyes locking onto Lyra. Her breath caught. His gaze was not like the others. It was not hungry, not cruel. It was deep, sharp, unreadable. The silence was heavy. No one else dared speak. The human raised a hand and tossed a small metal chip toward the auction master. The chip landed with a dull sound, enough money to buy her outright. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No bargaining, no words, just one move, and she was his. The auction master bowed quickly, afraid to anger him. "Sold!" he shouted. "To the human buyer!" Lyra clutched her chi, held tighter, her heart racing. This was the end. She had given herself away, but what kind of master had she given herself to? 2 guards moved to drag her down, but the human raised his hand again. "Stop!" His voice was deep, low, carrying weight. The guards froze. Slowly he stepped onto the platform himself. He did not touch her, he only stood close, his shadow falling over her. His eyes studied her face, then the child's, then back to her. "You belong to me now," he said, his tone calm but hard. Lyra's throat burned. She wanted to scream, to cry, to beg, but the child stirred weakly in her arms. His small hand reached toward the man as if sensing something. The human's eyes softened for just a breath. He turned, his coat sweeping the ground. "Come," he said simply. "You're safe now." Safe? The word struck her like lightning. In this place, in this world, no one was safe, especially not in the hands of a human. Yet, as she followed him through the silent crowd, her heart whispered a question she could not answer. Was this truly the end, or the beginning of something she never expected? The streets were silent as he led them away from the market. His steps were steady, never hurried, never uncertain. People moved aside when they saw him coming. No one dared to block his path. The woman, Lyra, followed closely, holding her weak child against her chest. She kept her head low, afraid of every shadow. She expected chains. She expected commands. She expected cruelty. That was the way of this city, but the human gave her none of those things. He only walked ahead, his coat swaying with each step, his tall figure cutting through the narrow alleys like a blade through smoke. The boy coughed in her arms. Lyra's heart twisted. She whispered comfort, though her words were empty. The child needed food. He needed rest. She wondered if he would live long enough to see what awaited them at the human's home. At last, they stopped before a large door made of metal. The human pressed his hand against a panel, and with a hiss, the door slid open. War. She expected him to speak, but he said nothing. Instead, he moved to a shelf, pulled out a blanket, and placed it on the bed in the corner. "You and the boy will sleep there," he said. She blinked at him. Not the floor?" His eyes narrowed. "The floor is for enemies. You are not my enemy." Her breath caught. She wanted to ask why, but fear held her tongue. The boy yawned, his stomach finally full. She carried him to the bed and laid him down. His small hand clutched the blanket as he drifted into sleep. For the first time in many nights, Lyra's heart eased, but only a little. The human sat in a chair across the room. He did not leave, but he did not come close either. He simply sat there, silent, his gaze fixed on the fire. Shadows moved across his scarred face. Lyra studied him carefully. His body was strong, built like a fighter, but his shoulders carried a heavy weight. His eyes were sharp, but beneath them was something else. Pain, maybe loss. She dared to whisper, "Why? Why are you kind to us?" His head turned slightly, his eyes meeting hers. For a long moment he said nothing. Then in a low voice he answered, "Because I remember hunger." The words struck her harder than any weapon. He turned away again, ending the conversation. Lyra lay beside her child, unable to sleep. Her mind raced. Who was this man? Why did he buy her, only to give her food and shelter? What did he want from her? The fire crackled. The boy breathed softly beside her, and across the room the human sat alone, silent as stone, staring into the flames. Outside, the city's night was cruel and dangerous, but in this room, for the first time in a long time, there was warmth, there was life, and there was a question that would not leave her heart. Was this man truly her master, or something else entirely? Morning light crept through the cracks of the shutters. The fire had burned low, leaving only faint embers glowing red. Lyra stirred, opening her tired eyes. For a moment she forgot where she was. The bed beneath her was soft compared to the ground she had known. Her son still slept, his small chest rising and falling peacefully. Then she saw him. The human was awake, sitting in the same chair where he had been last night. His head rested on his hand, but his eyes were open, sharp and alert. He had not slept. Lyra's heart quickened. Why had he watched all night? To guard her or to guard against her? She turned her face away, pretending not to notice. She rose quietly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. She tried to push aside the questions in her mind, but they pressed harder with every passing moment. Who was this man really? Why had he saved her in a place where no one else cared? When she stepped into the small kitchen space, she found bread and water already set out. The human did not move, but his voice cut the silence. "Eat. The boy will need strength." She froze. "And you?" "I've eaten." His tone gave no room for questions. She obeyed, breaking the bread into small pieces. Her son soon woke and smiled sleepily as she fed him. The sound of his laughter filled the room, soft and warm, yet even that comfort could not silence the strange weight in her chest. Later, when the boy was asleep again, Lyra decided to ask the question she feared most. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. "Why did you buy us?" The human's eyes lifted slowly from the fire. His gaze was hard, unreadable. "Because I could." The answer chilled her. It sounded like power, like control. But then, after a long silence, he added, "Because no one else would." Lyra lowered her head. She wanted to thank him, but the words stuck. Gratitude was dangerous. Gratitude meant trust, and trust could be broken. Still, whispers of his mystery began to spread. In her mind, she needed to know more. That evening, when he left briefly to fetch supplies, Lyra stood near the window. She looked out at the street below, where two traders passed by, talking in hushed voices. She leaned closer to listen. "Did you see him?" one whispered. "The human who bought the alien woman?" "Yes," the other said. "They say he was a soldier once, fought in the border wars." "Fought," he commanded. "They say whole towns burned under his watch." Lyra's heart skipped. But why would he live here in hiding? The first asked. The second shrugged. Because he lost everything, his family, his honor. Some say he's cursed. Their voices faded as they walked on, leaving only the echo of their words. Lyra's hands trembled. A soldier, a commander, a man who carried the weight of fire and death. She turned back inside, her mind racing. Was this why his eyes looked so heavy, so full of shadows? Was this why he gave her food without asking anything in return, because he had already lost more than she could imagine? When he returned, she dared to watch him closely. His scar caught the light as he set the supplies down. His movements were quiet but sharp, like a blade always ready to strike. Lyra swallowed hard. You were a soldier. His hands froze for a moment, then slowly continued their work. Who told you that? I heard, she whispered. His gaze snapped to her, sharp as steel. For a heartbeat, she thought he would strike her, but he did not. Instead, his shoulders sagged, the strength in them melting into something broken. Yes, he said finally, his voice low. Once. Silence filled the room. Lyra wanted to ask more, but the words felt dangerous. She sat beside her son, holding him close. The child's innocent eyes blinked up at her, unknowing of the storm between them. The human sat back in his chair, staring into the fire again. But this time his face was not only hard. For a moment, Lyra saw something else. Grief. She realized then, his silence was not emptiness. It was a prison he had built for him. Elf. Behind it lived memories too painful to speak. That night, as the boy slept, Lyra found herself whispering softly into the darkness. She did not expect him to answer, but she spoke anyway. Why do you carry so much sorrow? The fire crackled. For a long time he said nothing. Then, almost too quiet to hear, he replied, Because once, I could not save the ones I loved. Her heart clenched. She turned toward him, but his eyes were closed, shutting her out. She wanted to ask who, but she knew the wound was too deep to touch. Instead, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts heavy. This man who now owned her was not only strong, he was broken. His scars were not just on his face, but buried inside his soul. And she wondered, was she and her child safe in the hands of such a man? Or would his past swallow them too? The question lingered like a shadow, stretching long into the night. Days passed like slow drops of water. Each one carried small changes, almost too small to notice at first, but Lyra felt them. The first change was the way her son smiled again. The boy, once weak and silent, now laughed at simple things, at the way the fire cracked, at the shadow of his mother's hand on the wall, at the human's deep voice when he spoke. The second change was food. Every morning, bread and water waited on the table. Every evening, warm soup filled their bowls. It was never fancy, but it was steady. Steady was something Lyra had not known in years. The third change was trust, or at least the beginning of it. The human, whose name she had not dared ask at first, finally spoke it himself. I am Kael, he said one evening as he cleaned an old weapon on the table. His tone was simple, without pride or weight. Just truth. Lyra repeated it softly. Kael. The name felt sharp, strong, yet strangely safe. Kael was not like other men she had known. He never raised his hand against her. He never ordered her as a master should. He asked, always asked, do you want more bread? Will the boy eat this? Can you walk today? Each question confused her. She was not used to choice. She was not used to being treated as more than property. And yet, he gave her that space. One afternoon, Kael brought something strange into the house. A small wooden block carved into the shape of an animal. He placed it in front of her son. The boy's eyes widened. He picked it up with both hands and laughed. He made it walk across the table, his voice filling the room with joy. Lyra watched silently. A toy. Kael had bought her child a toy. She could not remember the last time someone had shown such kindness. Her heart trembled. It was dangerous, this feeling. Gratitude was a chain of its own. Later that night, when the boy slept, Lyra sat by the fire. Kael sat across from her, silent as always. The shadows of the flames danced across his scar. Finally, she asked, Why do you treat us this way? Kael's eyes lifted, meeting hers. His gaze was heavy, but not cruel. Because no one should suffer more than they already have. Lyra lowered her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust. But deep inside, fear still whispered. If trust broke, it would hurt more than any whip. The next day, the first crack in their fragile peace appeared. A loud knock shook the metal door. Kale stiffened instantly. He placed a finger to his lips, signaling silence, then opened the door only slightly. Outside stood two soldiers in black armor. Their faces were hidden behind metal masks, but their voices were sharp. "We heard you bought something from the market," one said. "A woman with a child." Lyra froze, clutching her son close. Her breath came quick, her heart pounding. Kale's voice was steady. "That is no concern of yours." The soldier laughed coldly. "Everything is our concern. You know the rules. No alien is to live freely under human protection. Bring her out." Kale's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, his tall frauds. Me filling the doorway. "She is mine. You have no claim here." The soldiers shifted uneasily. Even they seemed to hesitate before him. But the second soldier leaned closer. "Careful, Kale. People are watching. They wonder why a man like you hides with a slave woman and a child." The words burned. Lyra's stomach twisted. Kale's eyes flashed like steel. "Leave." For a tense moment, silence hung heavy. Then with a scoff, the soldiers turned and walked away. But their words lingered like smoke. "People are watching." When Kyle closed the door, Lyra's hands shook. She clutched her son tighter. "They will come back," she whispered. Kyle's eyes softened for just a breath. "Let them. I will not give you up." Her chest ached at his words. She wanted to believe him, but fear still pulled at her heart. The world outside was cruel. Could one man really stand against it? That night, Lyra found herself awake while Kyle sat once more by the fire. She studied him quietly. The way he kept watch, the way his hand rested on the weapon at his side, the way his scarred face softened only when he looked at her sleeping child. Slowly, carefully, she whispered, "Why risk so much for us?" Kyle did not answer at once. His gaze stayed on the flames. Finally, he spoke. "Because once someone risked everything for me, and I failed them. I will not fail again." The weight in his voice shook her. She wanted to ask who, but she stayed silent. Instead, she realized something terrifying. Trust was forming, not just hers and him, but his and her, and trust, once broken, could destroy them both. As the boy slept peacefully, Lyra lay awake. She thought of the soldiers, of their words, of the eyes watching from the shadows. She thought of Kale's promise to protect her, of his sorrow hidden behind silence. Her heart whispered a dangerous question. Was she still his slave, or was something far more fragile and dangerous beginning to grow between them? Outside, the city stirred with rumors. Inside, in the glow of the fire, two lives stood on the edge of trust. Trust as thin and fragile as glass. And glass, once broken, cuts deep. The nights grew heavier after the soldiers' visit. Even when the streets outside were quiet, Lyra felt eyes watching from the dark. Every sound, a creak, a footstep, a whisper of wind, made her hold her child tighter. Kyle pretended nothing had changed. He cooked, cleaned his weapons, and kept watch by the fire as always. But Lyra noticed the difference. His hand stayed closer to his blade. His eyes swept the windows more often. His silence was sharper, like a sword waiting to be drawn. One evening, Kale returned later than usual. His coat was dusty, his boots worn. He placed a small bag of food on the table and spoke in a low voice. "They're asking questions." Lyra froze. "About me?" "About the boy," he corrected. Her heart stopped. Kale sat down, his eyes locked on hers. "Who is he, Lyra? What do they want from him?" Her lips trembled. She shook her head. "He is just a child, my son, that is all." But Kale's stare did not break. It was the stare of a man who had seen lies before, who had carried the weight of half-truths in battle. The soldiers would not care for an ordinary child. Lyra turned away, tears burning her eyes. She had tried to forget, tried to hide, but the truth always found its way back. Her voice shook as she whispered, "His father was not just a man. He was a lord, a powerful one." Kale's jaw tightened. He did not move, but his silence pressed heavy. "He was cruel," she continued, "and when I tried to escape, I took my son with me. I thought I could hide, but they know, they always know." Kale's eyes darkened. "Which lord?" Her voice broke. "Lord Serac." The name filled the room like poison. Kale leaned back slowly, his face unreadable. He had heard that name before. Everyone had. Serac was a ruler feared across systems, a man who dealt in slaves, war, and secret. "Send the boy?" Kyle asked. Lyra clutched her son, who slept peacefully beside her. "He is Serac's blood, and they will never stop until he is back in their hands." Silence fell. The fire cracked, throwing sparks into the air. Kael finally spoke. That is why the market owner watched you. He knew what you carried. Lyra nodded, her tears falling. I sold myself to save him, Kael. I thought if someone strong bought me, they would keep us alive, but I never knew it would be you. Her words hung in the air. For the first time, Kael's eyes softened, not with pity, but with something deeper. He leaned forward, his voice steady. You are right about one thing. They will come, but they will not take him, not while I live. Her heart shook at the weight of his promise. She wanted to believe him, yet she also knew the power of Serac. Men who stood against him did not survive. Later that night, when Lyra and her child slept, Kael left the house. He moved like a shadow through the streets, past drunks and thieves, past soldiers on watch. He found the one place where whispers were traded for coin, the back room of a rusted tavern. The old trader inside flinched when Kael entered. You, the man whispered, I heard you bought a woman. With a child. Kael's hand pressed a blade against the table. Tell me what you know. The trader swallowed hard. The market owner sent word. He says the child is worth more than gold. He says Serac himself will pay for his return. Kael's eyes narrowed. How soon? The trader's voice shook. Soon. Soldiers are already searching. And bounty hunters. They say Serac promised land, riches, and power to whoever brings him back. Kael's blade cut into the wood. The trader jumped. Stay silent, Kael growled. Then he left, the weight of truth pressing on his shoulders. When he returned, Lyra was still awake, her eyes red from crying. He looked at him as if expecting him to turn her in, to hand her and her son to the men outside. But Kael only said, Pack what you need. We leave at dawn. Her breath caught. Leave? Where? Somewhere Serac's eyes cannot reach. She shook her head in fear. There is no such place. He will find us. Kael's gaze was hard, unbreakable. Then he will find me first. Lyra covered her mouth, fighting the sob in her throat. She had given herself up to save her child. She had expected chains, cruelty, pain, but instead she had found a man who was willing to stand against an empire for her son. Still, in the corner of her heart, fear whispered, was this courage or madness? Outside, in the darkness of the city, shadows moved. Men whispered. Hunters prepared. Word of the boy's blood spread like fire. And somewhere far away, Lord Serac himself sat upon his throne, smiling coldly as he gave the order, Bring me the child, alive. The morning air was sharp and cold. A faint mist rolled over the narrow streets, hiding shapes in the distance. Kael tightened the straps of his coat and checked the blade at his side. His eyes scanned every shadow. Lyra stood behind him, clutching her son. Her hand shook, but her jaw was set. She had no choice but to trust him now. Stay close, Kael said. His voice was calm, steady, but beneath it Lyra could hear the storm. They slipped through the alleys, moving away from the market, away from the center of the city. Kael knew the paths where soldiers rarely patrolled. He walked fast, every step controlled, every corner checked. For a moment, Lyra dared to hope they might escape, but hope was short-lived. At the mouth of an alley, 3 figures stepped out, blocking their path. Black armor gleamed in the mist, weapons drawn. Kael's hand went to his blade instantly. His voice was low. Behind me. Lyra obeyed, pulling her son close. The boy's small fingers gripped her dress, his eyes wide with fear. The soldiers smirked. Kael, one said, you've caused trouble before. But this is madness. Hand over. The woman and child. Kael's eyes narrowed. No. The soldier laughed, lifting his weapon. Then you'll die for them. The fight was swift, brutal. Kael moved like fire, his blade cutting through the mist, striking with deadly precision. One soldier fell with a cry, another staggered back with blood on his armor. The third hesitated, fear flashing in his eyes before turning and running for reinforcements. Kael stood over the fallen, his chest rising with controlled breaths. He did not look back at Lyra. We must move, now. They ran through the twisting streets, but the city was no longer quiet. Alarms rang in the distance, soldiers shouted, the sound of boots echoed from every direction. They're closing in, Lyra gasped. Kael grabbed her arm and pulled her into an abandoned building. Dust covered the broken walls, but it gave them a moment's shelter. He pressed his back to the wall, scanning the windows. Lyra set her son down gently. The boy whimpered, frightened, but she hushed him with trembling hands. Her eyes turned to Kael. You can still leave us. If they find us, they'll kill you too. Kael's head snapped toward her, his scar catching the dim light. Do you think I fear death? Her throat tightened. Why risk everything for us? His voice was like steel. Because I will not lose another family. The words hit her like a blade. She wanted to ask who he had lost, but the moment was shattered by the sound of boots outside. Kyle drew his weapon. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Stay down, no matter what happens." The door crashed open. Soldiers stormed in, their armor dark, their guns aimed. Lyra clutched her son to her chest, pressing into the corner. Kyle stepped forward, placing himself between them and the soldiers. His presence filled the room, tall and unyielding. The commander sneered. "Kyle, the broken soldier, do you really think you can fight Lord Sirach's will?" Kale's grip on his blade tightened. "I don't care about Sirach's will. This child will not be his." The commander raised a hand. "Kill him. Take the woman and the boy." The room exploded into chaos. Kale fought like a storm, blade flashing, fists striking, body moving with the precision of a man who had fought 100 battles. Soldiers fell one by one, their weapons clattering to the floor, but for every one he cut down, more poured in. Blood streaked his arm. A cut opened across his side. Still, he did not fall. He stood in front of Lyra and her son, a wall of flesh and steel, unbreakable. Lyra's heart pounded. She could barely breathe as she watched him fight. Her child sobbed into her chest, but she held him tight, whispering, "He will protect us. He will protect us." Then came the sound that froze her blood, a gunshot. Kale staggered. Blood bloomed across his shoulder, but instead of falling, he roared, his blade slicing through the last soldier in the room. Silence followed, broken only by his heavy breaths. He turned, his body trembling but still standing, his eyes locked on Lyra and the boy. "Are you hurt?" Her tears spilled. "No." "But you—" Another sound cut her off. Boots again, more soldiers outside. Dozens. Kale's eyes hardened. He pushed the door closed and barred it with broken wood. Then he faced her, his chest heaving. "They won't stop," he said. His voice was steady, but his body shook with blood loss. "They will keep coming. You must take the boy and run." Her heart shattered. "No, not without you." Kale knelt, his hand gripping her arm. His eyes burned with a fierce light. "Lyra, listen to me. I was given a second chance when I bought you. Do not waste it. Take him. Live." Her lips trembled. She wanted to fight, to scream, to refuse, but the look in his eyes silenced her. It was the look of a man who had already chosen his fate. The door shook under the soldier's boots. Shouts filled the air. Kyle rose, blade in hand. His blood dripped to the floor, but his stance was unbroken. And he stood between them and the enemy, a single man ready to hold back an army. "Go," he commanded. Tears blurred Lyra's vision as she lifted her son. She pressed her forehead against Kyle's for one brief moment. "Don't you dare die," she whispered. He gave a faint, broken smile. "Then run fast enough to make me follow." The door cracked. Soldiers poured in. Kale roared and charged, his blade flashing one last time. Lyra ran, clutching her son, her heart tearing in two with every step. Behind her, the sound of battle filled the air, steel against steel, shouts, gunfire. And in her soul, one truth burned bright. This man was not her master. He was her protector, and he was giving everything for them. The streets were still burning when the dawn came. Smoke curled up to the pale sky, carrying the smell of fire, blood, and fear. Lyra stumbled through the ruins of the alley, clutching her son to her chest. Her legs shook, her lungs burned, but she did not stop. Behind her, the sounds of battle had finally faded. Silence pressed down on her heart like a stone. She feared what that silence meant. "Kale," she whispered as she ran. His name was the only word she could force past her trembling lips. She found shelter in a collapsed house, its roof broken, its walls blackened. She laid her son down on a blanket of dust and held him close. The boy, exhausted, fell asleep quickly, his tiny hands still clutching the wooden toy Kale had given him. Lyra's tears fell silently. She had wanted to believe Kale was unbreakable, that no blade, no gun, no enemy could bring him down, but no man could fight an army alone. She pressed her forehead to her son's and whispered, "He gave us everything. Now we must survive for him." Hours passed. The city was restless. Rumors moved faster than soldiers. The human fought Sirach's men. The human killed a dozen before falling. The human still, lives. Every whisper brought hope and fear twisting together in her chest. Then, as the sun began to set, a shadow appeared in the doorway of the ruined house. Lyra froze.